Welcome, everyone, to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this podcast is about the ups and downs of dating and how to navigate through it. Today, my guest is G.Scott Graham. One of the things I wanted to talk about with Scott, it's about dating after a loss. And one of the things he mentions how that he lost his spouse of 31 years in 2019. He found his soulmate a few years later. And I'm impressed because I always think you only find one and you're done. And obviously, it can happen. So, first of all, Scott, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. I really appreciate it. And before we go, tell us a little bit about yourself and what was that journey like to be an my God, there's so many things in your profile that I want to like start with. So I'd
Right.
rather have you
Right.
tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. It's a privilege to be here, first of all. And
No, my pleasure.
it's great that you have this podcast because talking about dating, especially to these days, it has changed so much in
Yeah.
in light years in the last few years. And so it's great to have that voice so that people can learn the nuances of what's happening. And I went from, when I met my spouse, well, when I met Brian, I met him in the 1980s. Like
Hmm.
there weren't even cell phones then. There weren't
Right.
even, right? There was
Yeah.
there was there was like a few little crappy computers that were out there. There was no internet. There was no nothing. I met him, in a gay bar, and we connected and built our relationship. Until he died. We would still be together had he not died. We were
Right.
together for 31 years.
Wow.
Um, and he died tragically in an automobile accident
Oh
right
shoot.
before COVID started. And
Oh boy.
so it was just a shit show when COVID started. And we were all locked down, couldn't talk to anybody. And so I was grieving really alone and trying to figure out what was happening. And it was actually meditation that had gotten me through a lot of that stuff. I've done a lot of meditation since 1996, like well over like 250, 260 days of silent meditation,
Right.
10 to 2 weeks at a time, 10 days to 2 weeks at a time. And that's really helped me. And I wrote a book about that, about grieving and using meditation to work through that. And then, something happened like 3 years later, about 3 years later after Brian died. I wrote another book, same in the same series about grieving 3 years later. And now I'm writing another book, 5 years later,
Wow.
um, to talk about, what exactly is it? I have to tell you, Will, I was not when I met Peter, I wasn't looking for, I mean, I was kind of looking for something serious. I mean, you're not, if you don't create a dating profile unless that's not true. People do create dating profiles that are just interested in hookups and whatnot. Uh,
Right.
but, I'm 150% in on anything I do.
Okay.
And it showed on my dating profile, which has probably more words than any other people's dating profile I've ever seen in ever. Um, and I wasn't looking for, I don't know, I was treating the dating like a game at that point,
Hmm.
right? Lots of likes. We'll see whatever happens. Wasn't really, I wasn't chasing, right? I wasn't
Right.
pining, pleading at the computer. I was like, yes, yes, yes. And I think that night, Peter was one of, I don't know, 10 people that I liked. Like. Because,
Yeah.
half those people are probably are dead profiles and half the people aren't interested. And it's just so I wasn't specific. I don't even remember specifically liking him other than he was part of the like. And he
Yeah.
responded, and we connected and then we fell in love. And I said to him that I can't believe it. Like you said it earlier, Will, I'm grateful that I had a 31-year loving monogamous
Yeah.
relationship with somebody. Like that's more than, I mean, who gets that? Um, I'm really grateful for that. And now suddenly like I've like hit the jackpot twice.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy.
It is crazy.
Crazy.
I mean, it's a great story, and I'm, obviously sorry for your loss in 2019. And one of the things, Scott, um, I would say for me, and what I like to get your opinion on this. There was this woman I dated, but I felt I wasn't ready. I was like 28, 29, 30. Years later, I got lucky again in my mid 40s, and I met someone, and unfortunately, that didn't work out. We tried to have kids and all that. I was 48, she was 44. And I haven't been lucky since. And for you to find something, I mean, a tragic loss like that, that's something different. That's unexpected. When you have someone that might be sick and you see them, you know, I hate to say the word that they're gonna go,
Hmm.
but how your partner went, I mean, my God, and I definitely want to more talk about that, like how you got over that, and you were able to regain your strength to be on a dating profile. But my story obviously doesn't even compare to yours. But I just want to make a point that you're right. You don't find that twice in a lifetime.
No.
And I was lucky. And and if I had the chance, David, I mean, Scott, I would go back to the first girl that I was telling you about when I was 28, 28, and apologize. And like, you know what? I screwed up. I fucked up. I wasn't ready. You were a good woman. You always treated me well. And I screwed up. Uh, Unfortunately, I haven't had that chance, so I haven't seen her. I can't find her anywhere online. So, but
What? Are
yeah.
you listening to this? Where are you?
So, but anyway, Scott. So continue. One thing I wanted to ask you. Sorry, is courtship dead? It seems like when I talk to some women, men are not courting anymore. Like you said, the dating scene has changed over the last few years. It seems it's more transactional than courting and dating for a purpose. It seems like it's dating for some type of transaction.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be that way. It's almost, there is a well, I can talk about the gay dating scene,
Sure,
right?
sure, sure.
When in the 1980s, you in order to meet somebody, they at least had to have the courage to go to a gay bar.
Right.
They had to go someplace. They
Hmm.
had to have their shit together to at least the point that they got their ass in a car, they could have like hid in the bushes, run in through the dark, had a big black cape over themselves so no one saw them, but they at least had to have their act together to get to someplace physically.
Right.
Um, the unfortunate thing is that, at a bar, the social lubricant is alcohol, right?
Yeah.
So alcohol and alcoholism and addiction really play a big role in gay communities and
Hmm.
unsafe sex, and well, this goes on and on and on and on and on. And so, the people that didn't have it together, that you never saw them because they were like, in the shadows, like, in a public park, in a restroom. They were like, that's the only way that they could like get some sort of sexual connection was like
Right.
on the sly and on this and whatever. And now with these dating apps, you get everybody from the people who have it together, like me,
Mhm.
if I, or if I can be so bold, to like the absolute like nut jobs, like
Right.
people who are, yeah, I created a profile on Grindr, which is all about sex, and there were people on Grindr that were married and having sex in secret,
Oh wow.
and people that, would be like, I can't come to your house. I mean, I live in rural Vermont. Like
Okay.
it's it's rural fucking Vermont. Like there's nothing. There's a dirt road outside of my house.
So your next door neighbor is a couple of 100 miles away?
It's yeah. I could walk around naked here in the summertime and nobody would even see nothing. It's like
Right.
I'm on 107 acres,
Okay.
right? There's nothing. And the and I remember this one guy. He was like, he was afraid to come by because he thought somebody was going to see him.
Right.
I swear to God.
Wow.
Um, the that approach to dating is is I guess good and bad. I'm just going to tell I'll just tell about how that really negative impacted me.
Sure, sure.
And it really impacted my grief because it's an environment where you keep people at arm's length.
Mm,
You don't give a shit about you're just there to get laid. It's very transactional. And
right.
it's and for me, and this is where my current struggles around grief are. For me, one of the things that really helped me work through, and I'm not through grieving. That's a misnomer. If someone says, "Oh, you just have to get through grief, you have to put it behind you," that's all bullshit. Because
Right.
you never get through it.
Yeah.
I see these, I go on YouTube and every now and then, a couple of videos I see there's some advertisement about Sandy Hook and there's some
Yeah.
guy talking about his kid. Like he's never going to get through
Yeah.
that. What an arrogant thing to say. You haven't gotten over that yet, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if you are deeply loving, you're going to grieve deeply. It just goes hand in hand. The only way to avoid
Close.
not
Okay.
grieving is that is the only way to, did we just lose each other for a second there?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's okay.
Maybe.
I'll edit it. No problem.
All right, so
Go
let me
ahead.
just
Yeah.
take a step back there. Um, the only way to avoid grieving is to avoid loving. The
Right.
deeper you love, the deeper you grieve. And so the only way to not grieve is to not give a shit about people.
Yeah.
Um,
Are you seeing that though, Scott? Or are you hearing stories that it seems like I was telling you about, like dating seems transactional. Are we seeing more of that people are not letting their emotions out because of being afraid of getting hurt, rejected, or let's just put it, not giving a shit about the other person?
Not giving a shit about the other person. It's a big piece, right? I
Yeah.
see that often. I really see it in the dating apps because you're so distant and you talk to someone and they ghost you.
Yeah.
You have three conversations and that's it. And then the dating apps themselves reduce you down to a number,
Yeah.
right? How tall are you? How fat are you? How thin are you? How what do you like to do for kinky stuff? What do you like to do? What are your top three interests? And then we spend our time swiping or not swiping,
Right.
swiping, not swiping.
Yeah.
And so when you reduce a relationship to a swipe, like that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
When I've met Brian, there was no swiping. Can you imagine that? Just be like, someone could come and talk to you. You had to have skills and you had to, at least say, "Hey, I'm not interested, thanks." Or "No, I don't want to dance with you," or "No, maybe not this time." They had at least say that.
Scott, you hit on a good point. Because to me, I'm not a fan of apps. I rather meet someone, whether it's a networking event, a singles event, or something like that. That's me. That's how I prefer it because I want to see a reaction. Um, are people just hiding behind apps? I talk about even the younger people, whether, you're under 50, 40 to 50, our age, whatever it is. Does
I
that
think
make
it's
sense?
easy.
Like
I
they
think
hiding
it's easy to
behind?
see apps as a solution
Right.
and as the way to make it happen. And it's difficult. It's, in rural Vermont, it's difficult to meet other people.
Right. Literally, right? You're 100
Literally.
miles away from
Yeah.
everybody.
And it's in rural Vermont, it's really difficult to meet other gay people.
Right.
Like it's almost next to impossible. There's a couple gay social groups. They have like, a couple in Vermont there. I think it's like 802 and out in the 802. And they have a couple, I've been to a couple of their events and it's mostly, it's hosted at somebody's house and there's lots of drinking and carrying on
Yeah.
and it's not like you're meeting somebody at a knitting club or
Right.
a car enthusiast club or a hiking club. There are gay hiking groups, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and that unfortunately is I guess how the gay community is, you
Okay.
know.
So for you, Scott, and we talk about with G. Scott Grant, today's topic is dealing with a loss and what to do to me, what to do after. And I want to talk more about that. So when you suffered your loss, when did you know it was time to get back out there? Was it a feeling, or you just said, "Screw it, I'm just going to go back out there"? I always wanted to know that, because, like you said, you don't get over it. Listen, when I was a young man, I lived with my grandfather. When he
Right.
passed away, it took years, and even on occasion, he might pop up in my mind.
Right.
You know, um, what do you do? How did you like? How did you?
So for me, it was babies.
What was that strong step that you took?
There wasn't really a strong step. It's the
Okay.
same piece that I talked about when I said, any wackadoodle can create a profile and be out there. I didn't have my shit together.
Right.
My shit together. And I thought, you know what? I guess I might. I don't know what's going to happen. I'll at least create a profile because
Okay.
that was it. I'm horny. I'm still grieving, but I want to get off. And so I'll create a profile. I'll see
Yeah.
what happens. And I will not forget the first encounter I had with this 20 some year old kid who, saw my profile, connected. So that was it. The decision was I'll create a profile.
Okay.
Easy. How easy is that, right? Pictures, couple words, nothing. The next decision point, some kid said, hey, how you doing? We chatted back and forth. It was, I don't know, it was like a Saturday night. It was Saturday night in February.
Yeah.
There was snow on the ground, and he was like, yeah, I'd love to come over. And all that took was me typing in sure, and then I hit a little button that told him where my address was.
Right.
And an hour and a half later, he was at the front door.
Wow.
And so I hadn't even considered that piece. He came in, he's really gorgeous, which is really good because, I'm an older guy already. So just forget about being in a relationship. I'm an older guy and there's some really great, like Adonis there in great shape. Um, and we had great sex. And then he left. So there wasn't even like this discussion of anything. It was like that was great. He had great sex. He left. I haven't seen him since.
Okay.
That part of the story. He left. I haven't seen him since. I don't even
Right.
know where he is. If
Right.
you're watching this, hi. I don't even remember his name. Um, and 5 minutes after he left, I was in a fetal position crying
Oh, wow.
on the floor.
Yeah.
Um, because, like I said, those apps let any wackadoodle on there, and I was a wackadoodle. I, I didn't have my shit together. I
Yeah.
wasn't ready for that piece. If it was if it was the old days where you had to go someplace and meet somebody and da 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 da, then it would have been really hard to do. There would have had to been some really strong volitional step.
Yeah.
This was easy.
Okay.
And then I got trapped and caught by it. I was literally on the floor in a fetal position crying, uh,
Yeah.
and just racked with just torment and grief. Um, and but then I had already jumped in and tested the waters.
Okay.
So, I had developed a certain amount of equanimity. Equanimity is an important word. I talk about that in the first book, which is kind of balance through life's vicissitudes.
Okay.
And and in psychotherapy, when we talk about equanimity, a near problem of equanimity is indifference.
Okay.
So
Mm.
equanimity is you meet life on life's terms and you're balanced.
Okay.
Indifference is very close but indifference is you just don't give a shit,
Yeah.
right? And so the dating apps allowed me to unknowingly stop cultivating equanimity, but started building up indifference.
Mm.
Follow that piece?
Yeah,
I
definitely.
thought I had my shit together because I was balanced and cool.
Right.
But
But
I
it
was
took that
only,
encounter to
yes,
realize, oh, shoot, I'm not ready yet.
Yes.
Am I, do I have that?
You kind of have it going, but what
Yeah.
happened after that was that I even built up more indifference.
Okay.
So then I met Peter
Okay.
and I got caught, way off guard
Right.
because instead of having balance around relationships, I had built up the skill of indifference. And
Mm.
so I met Peter, fell in love, and then had this piece of kind of deep foreboding.
Right.
I was really gripped, like, if that I was going to experience loss again. And this is
Oh.
very common. This is very, very common for people who are dating again after grieving. When they get into a relationship, there's this sense of like, oh my God, yes, lightning did strike twice. I am in love again. And holy shit, I don't want to go through loss again.
Yeah.
So for me, the process has been to not smother, to keep my shit together and be
Yeah.
calm. Like if I didn't, I don't hear from Peter for a certain amount of time or this is going on, I'm not projecting that it's the end of the world, the relationship's over, everything's bad, no, no, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
There's a balance that I need with that. But because I was engaged in this superficial way on the dating apps, I that muscle of equanimity atrophied.
Oh,
And
okay.
I ended up thinking I had a strong muscle of equanimity, but
Yeah.
in reality, I was indifferent, which is
Mm.
great when you don't give a shit about the people. But
Right.
the second you give a shit about somebody, indifference doesn't work anymore.
Right. 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 Right.
Yes.
No, I definitely get that. So Scott, one of the things I wanted to ask you, and maybe and once my audience sees the podcast, what are some steps that after a loss do you go through? I mean, do you have to like sit back and think about, A, B, and C before I go out there, like you say, getting your shit together? Um, are there steps that you took or you could recommend to my audience? Like, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how I did it. Does my question make sense at
Yeah.
all?
Yes. Yeah. So there's two pieces that I can recommend and this is totally flies in the face of what you hear.
Okay.
Most people hear, oh, you've got to go through this grief and loss process.
Right.
And that phrase comes from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote a book called On Death and Dying.
Okay.
And and now that is used to apply to everything from people actually dying
Right.
to people getting clean and sober. They say, oh,
Mm.
you have to go through this grieving process because you're getting rid of your drug and your drug was your best friend and all kinds of other bullshit. I'm telling you, that is bullshit.
Right.
Before she died, she wrote an article that she said identifying those concepts was the worst thing she ever did.
Oh, wow. So she admitted it.
She identified that those processes for people who were in hospice and going through end of life struggles.
Okay.
I've got cancer. So there's denial, there's anger, there's bargaining,
Right.
there's finally you get to some sense of, all right, I've accepted the fact that I've got cancer and I'm dying.
Yeah.
That's what people who are going through an end of life process goes through.
Right.
That process got hijacked and applied to death for everybody. It's
Yeah.
complete baloney.
Okay.
So if you think that if you're grieving, you number one know that this whole process stuff is bullshit. There is
Okay.
no process. There is
Right.
no timeline. There is no magical thing to do. That said, it's just a feeling. We don't sit
Mm.
around and say, "Oh my gosh, that was it was so hysterical that comedy movie we saw the other day. It was really funny. And I just love that. I love The Big Lebowski. It's one of my favorite
Right. Right.
movies.
Right. Great
There's a
movie.
scene in The Big Lebowski at the very end when they're throwing the ashes and it comes flying back in The Big Lebowski's face. It's
Yeah.
absolutely hysterical. I can't tell you how many times I've seen The Big Lebowski. And
Right.
I'm almost laughing now talking about that.
Right.
No one's coming up to me and saying, why are you still laughing about that?
Mm.
Why I can't believe you're still laughing. Get over that. That
Right,
movie's
right,
in the
right.
past.
Total
Stop.
opposite of
Yeah,
yeah.
don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it because the movie's fucking funny. And
Right.
when I think about it, I laugh. And when I watch the scene, even though I know how the scene's going to end, I still laugh when I see that piece. Why am I still grieving about Brian? Because I'm fucking in love with him. And he
Yeah.
was a huge part of my life. And
Yeah.
that's how it's always going to be. And so it's it's just a feeling.
Right.
The second piece around that, though, and this is true for anything, is we need to be careful not to fuel the feeling.
Right.
Let's talk about anger. So
Yeah.
let's someone comes up to you and they give you the finger while you're driving down the road.
Right.
There you go. Tooted the horn, called you an asshole, drove away. They just did that once, right? And you're pissed about it, right?
Yeah.
And then some people are over it. They're like, "Ugh." They don't, some other people fuel that. And
Yeah.
2 weeks later, they're like, can't believe what happened last week. Thursday, I was driving home from work and this guy came up to me and he gave me the finger and I can't believe he fucking did that. Boy, if I ever see that bastard again, I'd love to run him off the road. I wish I had a louder horn.
Right, right.
They
It's
fuel
true.
that anger, right?
Yeah.
And he just wanted you to be mad once. You're mad for 2 weeks because you fuel that.
Right.
The same thing can happen in grief. We want to make sure that we experience the feeling and honor the feeling and don't lay fuel on the fire so that feeling
Mhm.
gets bigger and bigger and bigger and lasts and lasts and lasts and goes on and on and on. And suddenly you're immobilized, can't do anything.
Right, right.
And so if you're grieving, just be aware of those pieces. It's just a feeling. And you will note one of the things that I encourage friends to do, and this I wrote about this in my second book because, and this is the pivotal piece in my second book, is that somebody who's grieving, we don't talk about it after we were like, get over it.
Right.
The single best thing you can ask somebody who's having a difficult time is this phrase: how's your grief? If
Mm.
you have somebody who's depressed, now, it's like what, 20% of the American population's on anti-anxiety or
That's what I
depression
heard. Yeah, something
medication.
like maybe a
So
little
it's
lower, but yeah, yeah,
likely that
yeah.
you know somebody who's depressed. You can help that person just by going up to them and saying, how's the anxiety for you today?
Yeah.
Or how's the depression for you today?
Mm.
They're not going to talk about all their whatever. They're going to talk about it one step away. And they're going to say, it's not as bad as Thursday. It was really, if I didn't even think about it till you just said it to me today. I have felt really difficulties in 4 days.
Wow.
That's the kind of answer you're going to get. You're
Right.
not going to get, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. You're not going to get that. I swear to God. Try
Right.
it. You try it with someone that you know who has depression or anxiety. How's your anxiety today?
Right.
And you're going to get some commentary about how it's been. You help them. So that's a way to normalize it. But this is a very helpful thing for the individual because people who are anxious, people who are depressed, people who are grieving, they get hit with the magnitude and it overwhelms everything else.
Right.
Somebody's been grieving. Someone had a great Monday, great Tuesday, great Wednesday, great Thursday. Friday was shit. Saturday was shit. And you talk to them Sunday morning and you say, how was your week? Oh, it's been awful. I've been grieving all week.
Mm. Yeah.
Because it's like all over the place. But they
Yeah.
haven't. They didn't
Right.
on Monday, didn't on Tuesday, didn't on Wednesday, didn't on Thursday, did a little bit on Friday, did some on Saturday, and suddenly their whole week shit.
Right. Right.
You by asking them, how's your grief? You're not going to get a story. You're going to really help that person to really see that it's just a fleeting emotion, like laughter in the movie with the Big Lebowski. It's
Right.
not something that's pervasive in my life.
Got it.
Um,
Yeah,
And
no, that makes sense. I love that. Ask them, how is your anxiety today? And hopefully to me, I think if you talk about it, you're helping them out as a friend, right? I mean, that's
right.
how I look
You're
at
not
it.
you're not asking them what's going on. You're not saying what are
Right,
you anxious about.
right,
If they say, well, on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being shitty and one being great, where's your anxiety today?
right.
It's a three. Okay.
All right.
I
Not
the
bad.
reason I started the reason this came up is because after Brian died, in those intervening 1 to 3 years, I had two knee replacements.
Oh, wow.
Two,
Okay.
two total knee replacements.
Wow.
Like,
Oh.
ripped open my knees,
Oof.
put in all new metal parts, plastic kneecap, whole 9 yards.
Right.
Um, I can't tell you how many people come up to me and say, how's your knees?
Yeah.
How's your knees doing? I go for a walk. I go, ah. They say, how's your knees? Nobody fucking says, how's your grief?
Right. Right.
Nobody. And you know what? I have to tell you, I have a chiropractor friend who sent me a text, an email. And at the bottom of the email, after he signed it, it was just, I don't know, it was about some sort of businessy thing. It wasn't even personal. He just put, P.S. How's your grief? I didn't even respond to that.
Right. Right.
But I remember that email. And
Because of that. Yeah.
it caused a pause in my life. And I was like, how am I doing? And like, you know what? I got to call and talk to, Dr. Brian and let him know, exactly what this was a huge impact. So
Yeah.
even if somebody doesn't answer your question, you are serving them and helping them by asking them.
Yeah, no, no, that's a good point to take. Well, first of all, Scott, I want to thank you so much for being on People on
We're out of
Dating.
time, aren't we? Oh my God, we're out of time.
No, well, a little bit, but I definitely going to have you back on because I think this is a part. There's a part two here. Before I let you go, talk more about your books, or at least your latest book, or any book you really want us to know more about.
I have a
I know you have so
lot.
many.
I have so many. I just published number 24 this morning.
Amazing.
And so and they're all on varied subjects. This number 24 is on hacks and upgrades you can do to your RV.
Okay,
I know, crazy,
that's
right?
cool though.
Um, and last week, another book that I had been working on for probably since 2018, I finally got around and finished it and it got published last week. It's about Buddhist ethics and living a Buddhist ethical life. So you
Okay.
got RV upgrades, Buddhist ethical life, grief, everything in between. The
Yeah, you
way
cover the whole gamut.
the way to find me is to just go to gscottgraham.com. Easy. It's my
Yeah.
name. Squish it all together. No spaces, no periods, no nothing. And you'll see all my books and everything that I'm working on.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely put it on the show notes. Well, anyway, again, Scott, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. I'll definitely going to have you back on sooner than later. And I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule.
Great. Thanks again.
Yep, my pleasure. Bye bye.